If you are going to be successful in getting the most out of Photoshop and thus be able to get the most out of your images, you must have an understanding of resolution. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, the term resolution is defined as a description of the amount of image information captured in a scanned image. Now, you'll see resolution sometimes expressed as DPI, which is technically incorrect. DPI stands for dots per inch when it refers to printer resolution, a subject which is outside the scope of this tutorial. The proper expression of a photo's scanned resolution is PPI, or pixels per inch. Now, what is a pixel? Well, a pixel is a tiny square of solid color that, when combined with millions of other tiny squares of solid color in millions of color variations, create a photograph on your screen. Now, let's take a look at this group of trees in the fall in Boston that I took about 20 years ago, and we'll zoom in on it at 1600% RGB. See the tiny squares of color? Each one of these tiny squares of color is solid color. It doesn't have two shades. It doesn't have any gradient. It doesn't have objects in it. Each little square has its own color. Now, the adjacent squares vary a little bit from the one beside it, and when you group them all together into billions of little pixels and you zoom out from it, your image is created. So it should be obvious to you that the greater number of tiny squares of tiny variations and shades of color, the greater the detail in the image quality you're going to get. You always want to scan your images at the highest resolution your computer will absorb. And this brings us to the subject of hardware. A good high-quality scan of a typical slide at 4,000 ppi will result in an image size of about 45 megs, which is kind of hefty. Now, if you're scanning prints, you more than likely will not be able to scan a 6x4 print at a resolution above 600 ppi. The file size that Photoshop will be able to process maxes out at about 120 megs, at least on my machines anyway. If you've got a bigger machine than I do, then maybe you can deal with larger file sizes. But above that, generally, Photoshop will choke and crash. Now, it's for this reason that more is best when it comes to your hardware. The more RAM, the better. The more storage you have on your hard drive, the better. The faster your CPU, the better. Now, it's useless for me to discuss the specific minimum specs on your computer. Just get the strongest machine you can afford. And don't skimp on the video card. Now, if you are scanning properly, you will have giant file sizes. Just expect it and deal with it. Now, we'll talk about the different kinds of scanners in just a bit. Now, as you go about scanning, something else you need to be aware of. You'll encounter people at service bureaus and camera shops that'll tell you that a scan at 300 ppi with an 11 by 14 inch print size is the same as a 4,000 ppi slide scan at native slide size. Nothing could be further from the truth. Now let's take a look at these two photos. This is the exact same photograph of my grandson Cody catching his first fish, and we're going to zoom in on Cody's shirt. And again, you can see it. There are millions of little tiny squares of color that you can see. Now, the variation is not very much because we have a T-shirt that is pretty much the same color. But look at the photograph that was scanned at 4,000 ppi, the exact same photograph on the exact same scanner, scanned at different resolutions, and look at the difference in the squares. See, you have a greater degree of variation from one square to the next. You have lighter lights, you have darker darks, you have reds, you've got some greens, got some browns. You've got a greater amount of photographic information in the higher resolution scan than you do on the lower resolution scan. This one right here was scanned at 300 ppi, and this one right here was scanned at 4,000 ppi. You will always have a better, sharper, clearer, more vibrant image when you scan at the higher resolutions. So no matter what you're scanning, scan it at the highest possible resolution to ensure you capture the most color detail and image information possible. Now, we also follow this rule of thumb even when scanning for the web. Now, folks will tell you you only need to scan a 72 ppi scan for web images, but that too has not been my experience. You want to scan for the highest possible image detail and then convert to a 300 ppi JPEG image set at whatever size you wish for your online application. Trust me, this is 6 years of experience talking. If you start with a high-quality image, you'll finish with a high-quality image, even when your target finished product is an image on the web. Don't save these web images at 72 ppi, by the way. I always save my web images at no less than 300 dpi, even though the web images will only display on your screen at 72 ppi. Burn this into your brain. Start with a high-quality scan, meaning the highest possible resolution, and you'll end up with a substantially higher quality finished product.